So what would World War III look like today? Now, as of recently, world tensions have been fairly high, and that's due to a numerical amount of factors such as the Ukraine war, North Korea, Taiwan, some Middle Eastern conflicts and stuff happening, and a lot of like civil war-ish rebellion kind of things happening in Africa. So world tensions are fairly high. And let's say that World War III breaks out today. That would be pretty unlikely as of now, but if it were to happen today, what would it look like? World War III would most likely be one of the deadliest wars in history, right ahead of World War II. And that's due to the fact that, there's 8 billion people on the earth now. So let's see exactly what World War III would look like. Now, I have done a video, or I guess I've done multiple videos on this before, but today we're going to be doing it based off of present day, as in August 7th, 2023, relations and tensions around the world. They have changed a lot since I've done a previous video on this. So if you guys do enjoy this video, support is greatly appreciated, and let's go ahead and jump straight into it. All right, so there's multiple ways that a World War III can break out, and it all has to do with Russia and NATO countries. Typically, that's how I usually do it in all the other videos, and honestly, what other way could World War III really break out? I don't think a Chinese invasion of Taiwan would bring that upon the world, and I don't think there's really any other major conflicts that could arise. And it's especially easy to go ahead and conclude that it would start with NATO and Russia because those two are at each other's throats right now, especially considering the Ukraine war, nuclear weapons being moved around, and so on and so forth. So let's say that let's use the Russian mercenary group, so the Wagner group. They go ahead and they launch an invasion into Poland. Now, the Wagner group is kind of its own thing, although it used to be operating under Russia. It's kind of weird. If you don't know about it, go look it up, do some research, and then come back to this video. But they launched an invasion into Poland for whatever reason, and they claim that the Russian government is paying them to do so. The Russian government is going to go ahead and deny that they did such a thing, and tensions between NATO and Russia are now at an all-time high since the Cold War. It's also important to note that multiple Russian aircraft have been going into NATO airspace, like Finland or the Baltics, and have been escorted out by NATO fighter jets as of recently. And we can go ahead and assume that maybe like a dogfight would break out between them, and let's say that a NATO aircraft is shot down by a Russian aircraft over Finland. This is basically just the icing on the cake, as the Wagner group is doing things in Poland, who are apparently being paid by the Russian government, and now we have Russian fighter jets shooting down NATO fighter jets. I think it's safe to say that NATO has the justification it needs to go ahead and declare Article 5, which is NATO's defensive scheme. So basically, Article 5, if you attack us, we're going to attack you right back. All 31 member states will. All right, so Russia and NATO are now at war, and the world is kind of taking sides. The world already is pretty much divided between pro-Russian and pro-Western, or I guess pro-Chinese or pro-Western. It's really different depending on the region. So like in East Asia, you might be more pro-Chinese than you are pro-Russian because China has the greater influence in that region. Or in Africa, it's more of a divide between American, Russian, and Chinese influence. But you guys get the point. This isn't your first World War III video. So with this occurring, obviously Russia's going to go ahead and call in some allies because Russia would get stomped in this war by themselves, so they call in Belarus. Real game changer there. Ukraine will automatically default over to the blue side since they are being invaded by Russia, and we could also safely assume that Georgia would be in on this war as well. Now, also important to note that I included Sweden in NATO, even though they are technically not an official member state just yet. Hungary and Turkey have agreed in fundamental to approve them, however they have yet to do so. So Sweden is still not a NATO member, but they are very close to becoming one, just as Finland did not too long ago. So with Russia calling in Belarus to the war, we now have one large-scale front over here in Eastern Europe. And with this, it would be safe to assume that this fighting would break out almost immediately, as Russia and NATO both have a large amount of troops on each other's borders. We would most likely see Belarus connect up with Kaliningrad in order to relieve any stress that NATO might be applying to it. It's also important to note that Kaliningrad is also a very heavily military area, so NATO would have a lot of trouble trying to invade it should they need to. With this, we can also assume that Russia would do great things in the Baltics. Well, not great things, but great things for themselves, as the Baltics have a severe deficit in troops. Like, there's barely any military there. However, they're not going to get completely curb stomped here because America, the UK, France, they all have tons of troops over here in these Baltic countries, so they would most likely hold out. With Belarus now in the war, we could see them pushing into northern Ukraine and maybe even capturing Kyiv. Now, this might serve as a moral blow for Ukraine, however, this would not make them surrender, as they now have a reason to keep fighting, with NATO backing them up now. As we know, South Ossetia and Abkhazia are both being occupied by Russia right now. I'll go ahead and color that in, right? And it would also be safe to assume that they would continue to occupy even more parts of Georgia, eventually going all the way down to the coast and meeting the border of Turkey. Now, what other countries would join this war? It's a very specific war for Europe. You know, Russia, NATO, each other's biggest enemies, no doubt. In previous World War III scenario videos, I've stated that China would join this war. I think I've also sometimes said that they won't. In today's video, we're also going to go ahead and say that they are not going to join this war, and that is because Chinese and US relations have been on the rise as of recently. Now, they are by no means are they friendly countries. They are still hostile with each other, they still get on each other's nerves, and they still have this kind of rivalry, but it's shifting for the better for the two. China and Russia are also fairly close countries. They share a lot of the same enemies, being, well, I guess, America. But I would say that America's relationship with China is a lot more healthy than America's relationship with Russia. So with that in mind, and you know, China probably being smart, they would most likely not join this war. They export a lot to these Western countries over here, as well as import a lot from them. And when you're talking about trade and, you know, keeping your country alive and healthy economically, joining this war would just be shooting yourself in the foot. You're basically getting rid of one of your biggest customers. And not only would China joining this war do that to them economically, but it's also important to note that India, who is now the most populous country in the world, is starting to see a shift of economics over to them. So things from China are now moving over to India. Things are now being made more so in India than China. Although, I mean, no, not really. China still has a large, farther production rate than India does. However, India's production rate is on a rise. If China were to join this war on Russia's side, these Western countries would immediately snip over to India, and that would make India prosper. Now, the reason this is an issue for China is because China and India are not friendly with each other. They might be in BRICS together, but that doesn't really mean anything when you constantly have troops on each other's borders and constantly are slinging insults at each other. With China joining this war, it would almost solidify India as a blue team ally instead of a red team ally, because as we once again know, India and Russia are also allies. So these three countries right here, very confusing, but it all has something to do with China. So them not joining this war is a big relief for South Asia and even the West and Russia itself. So with China staying out of this war, Russia is going to once again look for more allies. They don't really have that many left. North Korea would almost certainly join this war, and that's to do with the fact that Kim Jong-un, I think, is going even more crazy than he already is. There has been a lot of stuff going down here between North and South Korea, and I think that a Russian versus NATO scenario would almost immediately ignite a Korean war. And with that, we have Japan joining the war on the side of the blue team in NATO. Now, this could motivate China to join this war. However, once again, I think it's of their best interest that they don't. China and Japan are large partners in trade, and even South Korea is as well. Them joining this war would shut down trade over here, and it would hurt the world even more. Yes, America being in a war is going to affect the world, but China being in a war with America would be like horrendously bad for the economics of Earth. And I think they're smart enough to know that, so China will not be joining this war once again, even with enemies like Japan and South Korea being involved. Now, although I did just say that, there might be another issue which could prompt them into joining, and that would be the fall of North Korea, which would almost happen imminently. I mean, North Korea stands little to no chance against South Korea alone. They may not like NATO troops being on their border, and similar to what happened in the first Korean War, they could join and push back those troops. Now, once again, I think that's unlikely because, you know, China has a head on their shoulders. They might not also like the presence of American aircraft being all over here since, you know, they're fighting a war. And they might not also like the fact that, you know, American aircraft, did I say aircraft? I meant to say naval craft, are also down here near Taiwan docking. They're near the Philippines docking. They're near Vietnam docking, and Australia, New Zealand. So, you know, a large-scale U.S. military presence near China wouldn't make them too happy, but I do firmly believe that they would stay out of a World War III scenario simply for the better of the Earth and for the better of themselves. So with these new countries in the war, the shift towards the Eastern theater is going to be troublesome for Russia. It's going to be troublesome for the blue team as well because they have to focus on another front now. However, Japan and South Korea are both top 10 strongest countries in the world, so they can hold their own for sure. But now that we have been talking about Russia and North Korea specifically, two large nuclear powers, it's time to mention that itself, nukes. Would nuclear bombs be used in World War III? And this has kind of shifted for me. I used to think that it would be a definite no, that, you know, Russia isn't crazy enough to do that. But now, looking at what North Korea has been doing and, you know, how they have been kind of barking towards the US and like threatening them, I think that North Korea would actually probably shoot off their nukes. And as horrible as that is, I just think it is a possibility now. I didn't think they would do it before, but now I think they will. So Realistically, nuclear bombs would be used, I think. But in this war scenario here, I'm not going to go ahead and do that because that would just end the world, and that's not fun. We want to see what a conventional war would play out as. Anyway, we can now go over here to East Asia here, and we're not even going to joke around here. North Korea is screwed in a war against South Korea and Japan, and it's also safe to say that Russia is going to be screwed over here because Japan and South Korea, obviously, their populated centers are over here, whereas Russia's populated center is over here in the west. So if they want to do things, they're gonna have to move their military all the way over here, whereas Japan and South Korea's military are already in this area. It's a huge geographical advantage for the blue team in terms of, you know, getting land and getting land fast, and they were able to take over what is like the only populated area of Russia over here, being down over here. Yes, they do have major cities along the southern border over here, but not as major as this area itself, since this is a warm water area. So now with Russia losing even more land here, and let's not even forget to talk about Europe here, they would push out at first. Without a doubt, Russia would be able to push into these NATO countries, but eventually, once the US and Western European countries get all of their troops over here, they are completely screwed. Russia does not stand the chance in a war against NATO. I used to make it fair and balanced because I wanted to appease the more non-Western, anti-Western side of the audience, but now that I'm taking into like account for realism and a lot of realism and factual how it would play out, Russia's not, they can't win against NATO. There's simply too many countries, too many troops, and their technology lacks behind in NATO. It would not end well for Russia in a conventional war. They are screwed. And sure, you could argue that, you know, Russia's a huge country. It would take forever to invade, and that is very true. However, their troops in Ukraine are not fighting. They are not doing what they are. The troops are not trooping, if you want to say that. Ukraine has been a complete failure for Russia. You know, they've been invading them for a year and a half now, and this is what they're at right now. They already had Crimea, so you can go ahead and just wipe that off the map. And all the pink here, this is what they've managed to get in 1.5 years. And they used to have more, but Ukraine was able to push them back. So yeah, if you can't beat Ukraine, who's being pumped full of NATO equipment, then you will definitely not be able to beat NATO itself. Now, coming down to the Caucasus here, I do actually think that Russia would have a stronger hold over this region due to it's an easy area to hold on to. Not saying that Georgia is an easy country to invade because it's a very mountainous country, but it's just an easier country to hold on to compared to like Ukraine or the Baltics. So Russia is backed into a corner now, and they're going to attempt to recruit even more allies, and they will be able to get some. And those allies are going to be Iran and Syria. And these will be the last two countries to team up with Russia, as no other country sees a point in trying to join this war, as it's very likely that Russia will not be able to do anything. Armenia, as we've known, is getting more friendly with Western countries. Now, the only issue with that is Azerbaijan, who is friends with Turkey, and Turkey, who is friends with Western countries. And we all know, or I guess most of us know, that Armenia and Azerbaijan do not have a good history together. In fact, they're even fighting a conflict with each other right now over this strip of land, or I guess also this area right here. Turkey does not like Armenia, and if you don't know why, then pay attention in history class, but also Armenian genocide. Now, with Iran and Syria in the war, Turkey will be a little bit more distracted, meaning that Russia has more opportunity to push into Turkish lands. Now, this area is mountainous, so the progress is fairly slow. Same thing with Iran here. Mountainous land, their progress is slow. However, they do manage to meet up with Russia itself. Turkey will go ahead and pull some of its troops from Europe in order to focus in on Syria. And speaking of Syria, they do not stand any chance in this war, as they are completely bamboozled by the Turkish. Alright, with Syria now gone, they can go ahead and refocus their troops up north in order to defend themselves from the Russians and Iranians. And with that, they're able to push them back, but not all of the way. We have Azerbaijan declaring neutrality in here, which is going to kind of hurt their relationship with Turkey, but not too much though, because they're still good friends. So let's go ahead and address some of the more neutral countries here. So India was one that I already talked about. They are friends with Russia and the US. And we know that they don't like China, and we know that China is friends with Russia and is not friends with the US, but they're getting better. And man, that is such a mind F. Like, geez, wow. India, you keep doing your thing. You play all sides. You're gonna win. You're doing great things. Another country that's semi-neutral is Saudi Arabia. Now, they used to be, I would say, likely pro-Western, then they turned into leaning pro-Western, and now they're just kind of neutral. They don't really have a preferred side. They've been doing oil production cuts, which has been drastically affecting US prices and gas. I've noticed myself 50 more cents is not fun. Like legit, I just got back from vacation. I haven't recorded a video since like maybe July 28th or 29th, so it's been like, you know, a week and a half. Yeah, but I left, gas was like 320 and I came back and it was like 370, so I was like, yes, lovely. So thank you, Saudi Arabia, for that. I guess also thank you, OPEC, Qatar, the UAE. But yeah, that's not really our issue. I guess we should just start producing more of our own oil. Although that's not good for the environment. So maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we should just suck it up. Maybe we should switch to EVs. What am I even saying? This isn't a political video. Okay, Syria's gone. Turkey's holding off the front line here. And Russia is starting to get slapped. Now, let me demonstrate what I mean by that. Well, Kaliningrad just fell. Remember how I said it was fortified? Well, it's not fortified anymore because it's flattened. Belarus just got blitzkrieged. Thank Germany for that. Finland is doing Finland stuff. And we see the Russians are finally kicked out of Ukraine. With this, a large front invasion of Russia is taking place from all sides of the border. Now, this is not likely. It is not likely that NATO would quite literally just march through Russia like this. That is very it's not smart. Instead, it's likely that they would use a strategy where they would, instead of just, you know, like I said, going all out, they would instead go for like kind of like a bulging technique where they push into like a certain region or area, or I guess oblast of Russia, and they build up their military presence very slowly, however very surely, as they make sure to, you know, fortify these lands and make sure that what they are getting is not going to be, you know, taken back in a counteroffensive. So, for example, something like this would take place where they go out from Ukraine and they go out from Belarus, and you know, they're obviously going to want to go after Moscow, the capital of Russia, which I can't even locate it anymore. All right, it's like right there, or like right there. I don't know. I used to be putting it over like, well, no, I think I've been fairly right. I'm looking at a map right now. It's like right here in the Sea of Azov, right north of the border. Yeah, so it is right there. So yeah, I'm right, of course, like always. And they're gonna go ahead and keep building up their military presence until eventually they are right outside of the gates of Moscow. And these are essentially just spearheads at this point, as they're not really too worried about taking the land in here, although they could very easily just, you know, cut it off and eventually annex it. Elsewhere in the world, we see that instead of the US focusing solely on capturing Moscow, we see that the US and other allies like Canada, the UK, Spain, France, and Greenland, they are going to go ahead and send their troops through the Mediterranean Sea and into Turkey, and also over here towards the Persian Gulf. Now, they have an idea, and that idea is to invade Iraq in order to get to Iran. I know, genius. It's probably made up by America, since, you know, Iraq, but they use troops that are in Syria and Jordan, who gave them military access, and Kuwait, who also gave them military access, and they basically disassemble Iraq. Like, it's not pretty. Iraq does have the capabilities to defend itself, but seeing as their history with America and how they have not been so well against them, it's safe to assume that some things may never change, and then America will simply just steamroll over Iraq in order to get to Iran. Now, here is where it gets interesting, because Iran is in a very good position for a war like this, because mountain. However, where they're not in a great position is down here in the south, where it's relatively flat, and well, naval superiority is out of the question for Iran. So multiple naval landings are made by the blue team, and eventually these naval landings link up into a large front, which begins to wreak havoc across southern Iran, taking over many large regions and states, or whatever they want to call it. Regions, provinces, I don't really know. I'm pretty sure every country has its unique name. So like the United States and Mexico, they have states. Canada has provinces. I think some countries use counties. Ukraine and Russia have oblasts. Some countries have territories. It's very different depending on where you are in the world. Also, who colonized your country. So like the UK, for example, most of their colonies have provinces instead of like states. Anyway, Iran, they, if you don't know, are also kind of in a weird civil situation where the people of the country aren't necessarily too happy with their government. As we know, Iran has been executing some people. They have been, or the police force has been doing some not so policey things to some people. The overall citizen out of 5-star review is probably a 1 right now. So it's likely that we would see some of the major cities in Iran, and I'm just nitpicking here. There's not really any major cities where I'm clicking. It's just kind of everywhere. But it's not out of the question to assume that these guys would rise up against the Iranian government, and slowly but surely Iran will start to crumble from the inside out. But of course, also NATO is invading it. I can see Tehran getting overthrown by the civilians in a very unlikely but likely scenario if the West were to supply them correctly. And eventually, Iran would simply just crumble and surrender. And with that, and with Iran's surrender, Russia is on their own. Now, using all the troops that are here in the Middle East, we have the blue team pushing up into Georgia and fully liberating it. Azerbaijan officially joins the war in order to provide military access to the blue team, which will help them invade into southern Russia. What's the purpose of doing this? Well, oil fields. I don't know if that actually serves a viable purpose. I know that during World War II, oil fields were a big concern down here for both the Soviet Union and the Third Reich, but presently I know Russia gets a good portion of their oil from Siberia. I don't know how nice this is now, but you know, cutting off some of Russia's oil supply will most certainly damage them and, you know, speed up the process of ending the war. We have them getting completely cut off from the Baltic Sea, and with that, they are basically all out of warm water ports. Ooh, yeah, no, they're screwed. I should know this, but I do not. So I don't know if you can get from the Caspian Sea to the Black Sea or the Mediterranean Sea or the Persian Gulf. I feel like that's a no, but I feel like it's also plausible. Like a large canal or river could do it, especially over here. Well, maybe not especially over here, but like through Iran. I don't know. You guys can tell me in the comments. I'm not bothered to really know or look it up. If a way of transport like that truly does exist, maybe Kazakhstan will allow for Russia to go through there, but even then that's unlikely since Kazakhstan is more of a pro-Russian neutral-ish kind of country now. Warm water ports over here, they're already gone. Japan and South Korea have that on lock, and now they're going to go ahead and cut up north in order to try to cut off even more of Russia's oil supply. Countries that are going to be still supplying Russian oil, probably in maybe Saudi Arabia, although I'm pretty sure Saudi Arabia would be bullied into not doing such a thing by NATO and other Middle Eastern countries who are in support of overthrowing Iran, like for example Israel, who has an interesting reputation over here, or you know, the UAE, arguably Qatar, Oman. It would just be a very interesting war in terms of politics. It's a very geopolitically interesting war. Anyway, back over here in Moscow, we finally have the city being taken by NATO forces. This area here collapses. And finally, we have the Russian government surrendering over to NATO. And with this, World War III has been won by the Western forces, and it is likely one of the most deadly conflicts in history. It most certainly isn't as large scale as World War II was, as not as many countries participated. Well, more countries participated in a smaller way. Europe, or NATO, is 31 countries, and then you add South Korea, you add Japan, you add Jordan, Kuwait, Georgia, Azerbaijan. That piles up. That's a lot of countries. And you have, you know, Russia, Belarus, Iran, sort of Iraq, Syria, North Korea. Maybe Russia, or maybe World War III had more countries involved because World War II was a lot of colonies, but overall the casualties likely are higher, but also maybe lower. I don't know. But this would be scenario 1 of World War III in a conventional way. Scenario 2 is nuclear obliteration, which I'm sure you're happy that I didn't show you that because this video would be very short then. Anyway, that is going to do it for today's World War III scenario. What if World War III happened today or broke out today? That's the title of the video, I think. If you can't tell, I'm like tired and burnt out. I'm not feeling it right now. And I would hate to not post a video on Wednesday because I missed both of the last 2 Mondays. So yeah, YouTube, it's getting really feels chore like, and I don't want it to feel like that. I want to take a break, I really do, but I do not want to because of what will happen if I do. And I've always had this big fear that, like, if I were to step away for 1 or 2 weeks and I would come back and the channel would just be dead, I would lose my audience, I would, you know, take a huge pay cut. And that's something that still does concern me, and that's just based off of like how other videos do. If they're a little bit different, then they do horribly. And then, you know, if I were to just stop posting my other content, which keeps the channel alive and all, then I think that it would probably not be too good. Now, I really shouldn't be worried about this. I really should be worried about myself more than that. But yeah, you never know. So yeah, I do apologize for that. Like I said earlier in the video, I just got back from vacation. I went on vacation from the 29th to the 5th. Great vacation. And then also I was on vacation from the 9th to the 15th. So really, July has been a huge vacation for me, but also I've had to do twice as many videos recording in a week, 2 weeks this month. So it's like 12 videos within 2 weeks. That's very draining. You know, I usually only do 3 recordings a week. So doing 12 and 2, 6, yeah, it's a lot. So maybe I just need to kick back into the gist of things. You're seeing this on the 9th. I'm just going over some important dates right now for any of you who care. Obviously you'll be seeing this on the 9th. It'll be likely, actually I'm not sure if there will be an alternate future video on the 12th, and that's because the series isn't doing too well right now, and I don't want to like overly push it if you guys aren't enjoying it. Kind of like a treat. Like, I don't want to say it's like a treat as in like a you guys did good, as in like a it's a good video that everyone likes, but if you do it too often, then is it really that great? So I don't want to overly push the alternate future series, which means that I probably won't push out a video on the 12th. Monday will be Age of History most likely, because I'm still trying to find other games to play which are mapping related. Speaking of Monday, that is my last day of summer vacation before I start school. Oh no, that's my first day of school. So I'm entering my senior year now of high school, so I will be no longer free on August 14th. So I got two videos until then. Oh god, oh man, I'm going through band camp right now at school too. I'm just kind of drained from, you know, vacationing and then driving and then now band camp. It's a lot, man. I'm starting to think that it's more of just that I'm drained mentally from all the stuff that I've been doing instead of me just being drained from YouTube. So maybe all that was for nothing. Maybe I lied, but I'm not sure if I lied yet. We'll see in a couple of days and weeks. Anyway, once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys for supporting the channel and doing all the great things that you guys have and always have been doing. All the great things that you do and have been doing. That's what I meant to say. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. And of course, thank you to all the super fans. This includes Patrick Clauser, Yo Moma Moma, Texan Cowboy Cheese, Kylie Speaks Plays, Poland Country Ball, Dimitri, DW Cool Dude, Nevada Garbage Trucks, Yakko, Soviet Ball, and Serminator. Once again, thank you guys.